Ukraine has launched one of its deepest and most significant strikes inside Russia's energy network, marking a major escalation in the ongoing war and signaling a dangerous new phase in the conflict between the two countries. According to Ukrainian officials, long-range drones were used to target key Russian energy infrastructure located far beyond the front line. These targets included offshore oil facilities and military-linked energy assets that play a critical role in sustaining Russia's war effort. Among the reported targets was an oil platform operated by a major Russian energy company. The strike caused visible damage and forced emergency shutdowns, disrupting operations and raising concerns inside Russia's strategic energy sector. This operation represents more than just another battlefield success. It signals a clear shift in Ukraine's military strategy. For much of the war, Ukraine focused on defending its territory and pushing Russian forces back from occupied areas. Now, Ukraine is demonstrating deep strike capabilities designed to weaken Russia's economic strength and military endurance from within. Energy infrastructure is the backbone of Russia's war machine. Oil and gas revenues fund military operations, weapons production, and logistics. Fuel supplies power tanks, aircraft, naval vessels, and missile systems. By striking these assets, Ukraine is not only targeting physical infrastructure but also attacking the financial lifeline that keeps Russia's military running. Russian authorities have confirmed that explosions occurred at or near energy facilities but have attempted to downplay the scale of the damage. State media described the attacks as limited and accused Ukraine of what they called economic terrorism. Despite these statements, Russia has taken the threat seriously, increasing air defense coverage around key energy sites and issuing warnings of retaliation. Moscow's response highlights the sensitivity of these strikes. Protecting energy infrastructure across Russia's vast territory is a major challenge, especially against drones capable of flying long distances at low altitude. Each successful strike exposes vulnerabilities in Russia's air defense network and forces the Kremlin to divert military resources away from the front line. Military analysts say these attacks demonstrate Ukraine's rapidly improving drone technology and intelligence capabilities. The precision and reach of the strikes suggest a combination of domestic innovation and advanced intelligence support. Western surveillance data, satellite imagery, and real-time intelligence are believed to play a role, although officials are careful about what they publicly confirm. Targeting energy facilities serves both a practical and psychological purpose. Practically, it disrupts fuel production and distribution. Psychologically, it sends a powerful message: no strategic asset inside Russia is completely safe. This challenges the perception of security among Russian elites and the general population, increasing pressure on the Kremlin. At the same time, Russia continues its own campaign of missile and drone attacks against Ukrainian cities. Power grids, ports, railways, and civilian infrastructure remain frequent targets. Russian strikes aim to weaken Ukraine's economy, exhaust its air defenses, and undermine civilian morale, particularly during winter months when energy systems are under maximum strain. The war is increasingly becoming a battle of energy warfare. Fuel, electricity, and logistics are now as decisive as tanks, artillery, and infantry. Control over energy infrastructure determines how long each side can sustain large-scale military operations. Ukraine's strategy reflects lessons learned over nearly 3 years of conflict. Rather than engaging solely in costly ground offensives, Kyiv is expanding its ability to strike strategically important targets that create long-term pressure on Russia. This approach reduces Ukraine's own casualties while forcing Russia to spend more resources on defense and repairs. The global impact of these strikes cannot be ignored. Any disruption to Russian energy production has the potential to affect global oil and gas markets. Even small changes in supply can influence prices, adding uncertainty to an already fragile global economy. Investors, governments, and energy companies are closely monitoring developments. For Europe, the stakes are particularly high. Although many countries have reduced dependence on Russian energy since the start of the war, Russia remains a major global supplier. Escalation in energy warfare increases fears of price volatility and supply shocks. Politically, these strikes complicate diplomatic efforts. Russia views attacks on its energy infrastructure as a direct challenge to its sovereignty and economic security. Ukraine, meanwhile, argues that such strikes are a legitimate response to Russia's continued attacks on Ukrainian civilians and infrastructure. As the war enters this new phase, questions are growing about how far Ukraine will push its deep strike campaign. Will energy facilities inside Russia become regular targets? Will Russia respond by escalating its own attacks or expanding the war geographically? Another concern is escalation beyond conventional warfare. Russia has repeatedly issued warnings about red lines, including references to nuclear capabilities. While most analysts believe nuclear use remains unlikely, the risk of miscalculation increases as strikes reach deeper into Russian territory. Inside Ukraine, these operations are seen as proof that the country can fight back against a larger and better resourced opponent. They reinforce national morale and demonstrate that Ukraine is not limited to defending its own territory but can strike back strategically. Inside Russia, however, the effect is more complex. Official narratives attempt to minimize the damage, but repeated incidents challenge public confidence in the government's ability to protect critical infrastructure. Over time, this could have political consequences. Military experts describe the situation as a slow but deliberate shift toward strategic attrition. Instead of seeking quick breakthroughs, Ukraine is aiming to erode Russia's capacity to sustain a long war. Every damaged facility, every disrupted supply line, and every forced shutdown adds pressure. The conflict is now unfolding across multiple domains: land, air, sea, cyberspace, and energy networks. Drones have become one of the defining tools of this war, reshaping how modern conflicts are fought. As both sides adapt, the risk to civilians remains high. Energy warfare often impacts ordinary people first, through power outages, fuel shortages, and economic hardship. This makes the conflict even more devastating beyond the battlefield. The international community continues to watch closely. Western governments largely support Ukraine's right to self-defense, while urging caution to avoid uncontrolled escalation. Russia's allies criticize the strikes but offer limited direct support. What is clear is that the war is far from over. Ukraine's ability to strike deep inside Russia has added a new dimension to the conflict, one that could reshape the balance of power and influence future negotiations. Whether this strategy will shorten the war or prolong it remains uncertain. What is certain is that energy infrastructure has become a central battlefield, and its role will only grow as the conflict continues. The situation remains tense, unpredictable, and dangerous, and the world is watching closely. Ukraine has carried out one of its most daring and strategically important operations of the war so far, launching deep strikes into Russia's energy network and signaling a sharp escalation in the conflict. According to Ukrainian officials, long-range drones targeted critical Russian energy infrastructure located hundreds of kilometers from the front line. These strikes reportedly included offshore oil platforms and energy facilities linked directly to Russia's military supply chain. The attacks caused damage significant enough to force emergency shutdowns, disrupting operations and raising alarms across Russia's energy sector. This development marks a clear turning point in Ukraine's war strategy. For much of the conflict, Ukraine focused on defending its cities, pushing Russian forces back, and protecting its own energy grid from relentless attacks. Now, Ukraine is demonstrating that it can strike strategically important targets deep inside Russian territory, shifting the pressure directly onto Moscow. Energy infrastructure is not just an economic asset for Russia, it is a military lifeline. Oil and gas revenues fund weapons production, pay soldiers, and support large-scale military logistics. Fuel powers tanks, aircraft, naval fleets, and missile systems. By targeting these facilities, Ukraine is aiming to weaken Russia's ability to sustain a prolonged war. Russian authorities have confirmed explosions near energy sites but have attempted to minimize the damage in official statements. State-controlled media accused Ukraine of what they called economic terrorism, while the Kremlin warned of retaliation. At the same time, Russia has quietly increased air defense coverage around key oil and gas facilities, indicating concern over further strikes. Military analysts say the operation highlights Ukraine's rapidly advancing drone technology and intelligence capabilities. The accuracy and distance of the strikes suggest detailed targeting information, advanced navigation systems, and possibly support from Western intelligence and satellite surveillance. While these claims are not officially confirmed, the results speak for themselves. Beyond physical damage, these strikes carry a powerful psychological impact. They send a clear message that Russia's critical infrastructure is vulnerable and that distance from the battlefield no longer guarantees safety. This challenges public confidence inside Russia and forces the government to spread its defenses thinner across a vast territory. Meanwhile, Russia continues its own campaign of missile and drone attacks against Ukrainian cities. Power plants, substations, ports, and civilian infrastructure remain frequent targets. Russia's goal is to weaken Ukraine's economy, exhaust air defenses, and pressure civilians through energy shortages, especially during colder months. The war is increasingly evolving into a conflict centered on energy warfare. Electricity, fuel, and logistics are now as decisive as traditional weapons. Control over energy infrastructure determines which side can continue fighting at full capacity. Internationally, the strikes have raised concerns about global energy markets. Any disruption to Russian oil and gas production can affect global prices and supply chains. Governments and investors are closely monitoring the situation, aware that escalation could have worldwide economic consequences. Politically, the strikes complicate diplomatic efforts. Ukraine argues that targeting Russian energy assets is a legitimate response to Russia's ongoing attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure and civilians. Russia, however, views these strikes as a dangerous escalation and a direct threat to its economic stability. As the war enters this new phase, one question dominates: how far will Ukraine push its deep strike campaign, and how will Russia respond? Each successful strike increases pressure on Moscow but also raises the risk of wider escalation. What is certain is that the conflict is no longer confined to front lines and trenches. It now extends deep into energy networks, economic systems, and global stability. The situation remains tense, unpredictable, and closely watched by the entire world.